right, let's testify tonight.
Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? 'Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing it. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
I hope that you are all doing well, or as well as can be. So I am just about exhausted with this week, with all the crazy political shenanigans and all that stuff. I'm just done. So anyway, whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm game. I'm curious as to see what you guys have. See, there's a few people watching. Nobody's commented as of yet, but welcome to those that are here. And we'll see who ends up being first. printer is printing away. Might finish the print I'm working on before the show is over. We'll see. If it does, I think it'd be cool to show you guys. And my last 3D print, I haven't done any finishing work on this stuff yet, mainly because I don't have time, and I also need to get some supplies, which I don't have the money for. But that would be the Daredevil mask that T'Pring is currently staring at right there. So that was a fun little project to put together. Anyway, so I'll give it a second. If you guys don't have anything to say, we can always wrap up early. That'll be easy. Just say, hey, that was a fun show. Nobody wants to talk, so I guess I'll just feel like I'm all alone. However, Robert has decided to break the silence, saying shalom today, Salty Trigger. Shalom, shalom, Robert. I hope you are doing well. Speaking of my favorite Hebrew greeting, I've been watching The Chosen. We're currently in season 4. And I got to say, if you haven't seen that show, if you're interested in it's a work of fiction. I mean, I know a lot of people think the Bible is a work of fiction, but I'm saying that it's not based 100% on the scriptures in the Bible. It's a biopic, if you will, about pretty much all of the people involved back then. And I think, and while, a lot of it is pure speculation as far as like Simon Peter, I don't believe it says anywhere that he had massive debts due to his, problems with gambling and fighting and all that. Nor is there any indication that Matthew was in fact autistic or anything. Those are all completely done with artistic license. But the thing that I do think is interesting is that they fairly accurately depict what life was like 2,000 years ago in Israel. So you can get a real feeling for what was it like to be a Jew in the first century, and and obviously the various events that are depicted in the first 4 books of the New Testament are included, but they're included as springboards to various dramatic ideas and stuff, and I think it's a good show. So I would highly recommend it if you're interested in that kind of thing. It's also very well put together. The cast is outstanding, and it's just a fun show overall. Robert says, I'm doing okay. Raining here today, though. Yeah, it's supposed to rain here as well. I haven't looked outside to see if it is in fact raining. If it is, it's not raining hard because it's not particularly loud or anything. I don't hear it. I can hear the printer going, but I do not hear any rain. But, we'll see. And then Robert follows up with the Hebrew Roots Church I'm following here now on YouTube, El Shaddai Ministries. They sure do believe in long services. Last week's was about 5 hours long with several 15-minute breaks. That is a little excessive. And, like I said, I'm not into the whole Hebrew Roots movement, but, if you feel like it brings you closer to God, I think that's awesome. As long as you don't try to suggest that is what Christians must do to be Christians, because that clearly is not the case if you read what the text actually says. Gorilla in the house says, Kapla, how you doing, Gorilla? Hope you are well. And Robert says, yesterday's service is pretty long as well. Well, yeah, it sounds like they're into, Let's just spend the whole day. They run longer than one of my live streams. And like I said, I think I mean, I can see where an event like that could be fun and profitable from a spiritual perspective. But I think if you did that regularly, it would create an idol of the church itself. I don't think that the church should be a distraction from being able to basically do anything in your life. I don't think that I do not dedicate my life to the staff of the church. Speaking of Hebrew roots, do you think that goes too far with Christianity's Jewishness? Well, that's just it. Christianity is not Jewishness, and I think that's one of the reasons that I take issue with it. Now, again, if somebody wants to practice it because they feel that it brings them closer to God, fine. But I do not believe that there is anything in the Bible that would even come close to suggesting that that is the proper way, if you will, or that there is any kind of divine commandment from Christ that that is how non-Jews should approach their relationship with God. Is that all of a sudden everybody needs to convert to being a Jew. The Jews had 613 commandments, many of which to this day people may not understand fully, or it may not make sense. Many of those 613 commandments are simply not relevant in a modern technological society. Things like the mixing of fabrics and stuff like that doesn't really apply so much today. And we forget that while Christ came first to the Jews, he was a Jew, but he came first to the Jews. The Jews were the chosen people to be the light bearers, if you will, to be the source from which Christianity flows. And meanwhile, but the rest of the world needs to get that message too, and that doesn't mean they need to suddenly become Jews. And I think that's where the confusion comes in. And in fact, there's even, and the funny thing is, when people today argue about this stuff, all you have to do is read the book of Acts. When the church was founded, there were intense discussions between the original apostles as to what teachings they needed to bring to the Gentiles. Did they need to be, a big discussion was, do they need to be circumcised, right? And the idea of circumcision was no small affair. And I'm not saying, because obviously, if you're an adult man, being circumcised would not be a pleasant experience, but the idea of circumcision was to basically take on the covenant of Abraham. Had nothing to do with the new covenant of Christ. And so the only time it would be applicable is if you were Jewish. You know. So if you're not circumcised and you're a Christian, you don't have to run out and get circumcised. And Paul writes about this a great deal when he talks about the idea of circumcision of the heart, because Jewishness is a religion of law, and when it comes to Christianity, I don't even like calling Christianity a religion, even though it's because I would say Methodism and Catholicism and the Baptists, those are religious groups, those are religions. Christianity, as much as it's an overused cliche, is in fact about simply having a relationship with Christ Himself. So it's not about a certain set of religious practices. It's not about do this and then do this, and then do this. And it's not a checklist of 613 commandments. What Christ is interested in is not a checklist. He's interested in your heart. He's interested in your attitude. Because one can follow the law without necessarily agreeing with it. So, for example, in most places, there are speed limits, right? And so the speed limit, for example, on one of the roads near my house is 45 miles per hour. Now, a Jew would say you have to travel at 45 miles per hour or less because that is the law. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's say that what Christ is saying, that he's not as concerned with the fact that you're driving 45 miles per hour as much as, do you care about why you're driving 45 miles per hour? Do you care about, like, why is the speed limit set to 45 miles per hour? Well, it's set to 45 miles per hour because that's deemed to be a safe speed in which you can react to the various things that commonly might come up on that road, and be able to interact with your fellow drivers if there's an emergency, either with you or with them. And so, do you care about that? Or are you just driving 45 miles per hour because the law says you can't drive faster than 45 miles per hour? And then, of course, you have people, and unfortunately, the vast majority of people, and again, this is actually a pretty good analogy to it, is the majority of people just don't follow the law, right? They just drive whatever speed they feel like driving, usually significantly faster than 45 miles per hour. So, I think that we need to be very careful of, you know, of why we are doing things. Gorilla says, "I'll be here till it's time to start weaving the bacon for a bacon weave pizza." Oh, okay. Well, you enjoy your bacon weave pizza. Robert says, in the olden days, churches used to have very long churches. Well, some churches still do. Like, you go to an Assemblies of God church, or some Southern Baptist churches, and it is still an all-day affair. There are people that will get up bright and early on Sunday morning, go to church, come home for lunch, and then go back to church, and then and spend the evening in church. In fact, my father-in-law to this day does that. And, you know, I think that's, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that church is a waste of time, because it certainly isn't. But is that all-day church service, is it actually being productive, or are you just doing it to do it? Is it, because if it's just a religion, if it's just something you do, like you have your order of service and all that, but there's no heart behind it, then ultimately I would say it's fruitless. What happened to the 40-day fast phase? I've had some technical problems getting them done, and physical exhaustion also took its toll. I want to try to get the rest of them done, and I apologize for that. If you've been following it, that's entirely on me. And so I want to get them done just to have them on as a reference. But yeah, I apologize for that. Robert says, "No, we believe we are just grafted in." Right, but what I would ask you, let me ask you this: do you believe? Because I mean, the grafting in is an analogy or metaphor that's used in the Old Testament. The idea that so Jesus is the grapevine, if you will, and the Jews were the original stalks that came off of this vine. And then God the Father is like, the person tending the grapes, and you would prune back the ones that are not productive so that they could grow and become more productive. And that's how he was based. So pruning would be some of the various things that have happened to Israel over the years. However, there are also the Christians are people who have been grafted in, and so basically, in farming, you can take a section of one plant and graft it to another, and it will continue to grow. And so the idea is that a Christian is a person that's literally grafted onto the vine. But do you believe that in order to be grafted in order to be, truly a part of the vine, that you need to become a Jew? Like the pastor said and taught last week about the mix up about the new covenant, which was actually made with the Hebrew people as believers were just grafted in. Let's see. Everyone doing the posted speed limit is not. Everyone doing this posted speed limit is just not really possible. If one did, everyone would be on each other's bumpers, literally. No. Keep in mind, obeying the speed limit laws means that if the speed limit is set to 45 miles per hour, it means you drive 45 miles per hour or less. If the person in front of you is driving 45 miles an hour and you're driving 45 miles per hour, guess what? Your car is never going to get on their bumper because let's say you pull onto the road, you have to accelerate to 45 miles per hour. So now you're a couple hundred feet behind their car. You're never going to catch up with their car because they're going 45 and you're going 45. And if they're driving a little bit less, let's say they're going 43 miles per hour, that doesn't mean you drive 45 miles per hour and hit them. It means that you slow down to 43 miles per hour. That's basic safety. But I think that it's sad that people just ignore the speed limit. Okay, so what about false gods in the Bible? What about them? That's kind of a vague question. I don't know what you're asking. Are you asking, are they real? In which case, I would say probably not. Although there's an argument to be made that some of them could be manifestations of demons. But I'm not. Or are you? Or is there some other question you're asking about? Oh, okay. USA Army versus Chinese Army, no nukes. If the United States got into a conventional war with China, we would lose. I would say, well, at least from the information that I had available. How did Mr. Bean defeat the Doctor from Doctor Who? Well, in all probability, the Doctor from Doctor Who would try to use. Well, first of all, the Doctor from Doctor Who is, generally speaking, he doesn't really use lethal force. I mean, unless he's changed in the last couple iterations that I have, because I haven't watched it since Capaldi. But the Doctor is generally nonviolent, so it wouldn't be much of a fight per se. Mr. Bean would probably just be invited onto the TARDIS as a companion of the Doctor, and then Mr. Bean would accidentally bump into a switch on the central console that would open a door as the TARDIS was going through in between dimensions, and the Doctor would fall out and be lost forever in the space between space. Street Preacher Stan is in the house. Good to see you. And what do you think if America? What do you think if America was a person? Then America would be a very confused person. A person that suffered from what is it? Dissociative identity disorder or something, multiple personalities, basically. A person that was eternally conflicted with itself and changed personality about every 4 years. Let's see. Any chance China is misreporting their offensive capabilities? I would say this: the information that I had, I don't have access to it anymore, but the information that I did at one point have access to was not from the Chinese reporting anything. Do you really think we don't spy on the Chinese? I mean, come on. And if everyone goes 60, same thing. No, the thing is, if everybody followed the basic speed limit for whatever roads they're on, the roads would be a much safer place. Don't know what you're arguing there. I do think that the false gods could be real people. There's something called the Share International, which taught someone was a living god, and there are other cults that certain people are deities. Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at depending on the belief system involved, like because the Egyptians believed that Pharaoh was God, the Romans believed that the emperor was God, or a god, I should say, not the creator God, obviously. And so you're not talking about necessarily always these beings of a supernatural origin. You also, however, have gods, lowercase g, from various religions that some people will swear manifested in some way. And that's where I say, like, it could be something demonic or something like that. You know, so I'm certainly not suggesting that they are, well, every ancient religion is 100% false, but it could be based on a deception. Does USA know they're outgunned from sat feed? Yes, satellite feeds are part of it, but yes, we know. From a conventional standpoint, first of all, the good news is China is not an expansionist country. China has no real interest in invading the United States. And in fact, I know a million people have done videos about it, but invading the United States would be virtually impossible for any nation or even any consolidation of nations. Even if every single nation on planet Earth decided to get together and straight up invade, not no nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons, but they just decided to straight up invade the United States. It would it's one of our greatest weaknesses is also one of our greatest strengths. Americans are feisty individuals, and Americans are armed to the teeth. There are more weapons in this country than there are people. And you better believe that the rednecks in Alabama are going to be more than willing to share their weapons from the thugs from the inner city to defend this country against an invasion. It's one thing to army, right? Where if you were to compare military strength, we could not overcome the Chinese military. There's absolutely no way that we would do it. And if you took the two militaries and put them in an isolated area and said, duke it out, we would have no chance. However, there is absolutely no way that the Chinese or anybody else could successfully invade and capture America without nuclear weapons. And that's a good thing, but I don't think that the demise of the United States of America is coming from foreign invasion. I think it's coming from internal collapse. And so I wouldn't even worry about that. Let's see. The vast majority of them are just charlatans, but maybe some gods throughout history have some demonic power. Yeah, it's entirely possible. And, that's why I would say this. You know, so if somebody claims some miraculous thing happened in some alternative religion, I would say that's entirely possible, but are you sure that it is something of God, or is it something that could be associated with a demonic manifestation? And by the way, that is true even within Christian circles, because sometimes people within Christianity can be misled, believing that they've seen signs and wonders that could well be a coincidence or of demonic origin in order to mislead Christians into doing the wrong thing. So That's why, if you are a Christian, if you truly believe that the documents contained in what we call the Bible are factual and true, then any type of vision, any type of voice, any type of guidance that you feel you have you experienced, should be checked against. It should be fact checked, basically, against the text, because one thing, and I do think it's interesting because Paul writes about this directly, is that even if an angel appears to you, talking to you, Muslims and Mormons, even if an angel appears to you and gives you specific instructions, but they're different than the established gospels, you need to flat out reject it. And I do think it's interesting that two of the largest competitors to Christianity, namely Muslims and Mormons, both claim that an angel showed up and gave new directions that contradict the old ones. You know, it's interesting. I actually got into an interesting discussion with a Mormon this past week, who was trying to suggest that the Book of Mormon was factual, and that, basically when Paul wrote that you should not listen to the word of an angel, that wasn't actually scripture in and of itself, because, of course, in the New Testament, when they refer to like Timothy refers to all scripture as God breathed, scripture at that point was only what we called the Old Testament. And therefore, anything and everything in the New Testament was not scripture, because at the time they didn't call it scripture. However, then you get into some interesting things, because Paul wrote the majority of what we call the New Testament, or the majority, at least as far as number of books. Paul did not write any of the Gospels. He did not write Revelation, which is the most well-known part of the New Testament. But all the stuff in between the Gospels and Revelation, the epistles, the vast majority of that was written by Paul. Paul was really the first true theologian. But what's interesting about that is that Peter himself affirms the writings of Paul as scripture. And he does this, I believe, in Second Peter, and so this is where this is where you have to be able to, if you're going to have a discussion on these things, you have to be able to speak with some knowledge, because if somebody's going to push back on you, you need to know how to answer. So when this person was saying that the writings of Paul were not scripture, I invoked Peter. And let me find it real quick. And let's see. Okay, yeah, First Peter, Second Peter 3. So I didn't have this prepared because I wasn't planning on going here, but I do think it's interesting. All right, so all right, so it's kind of, okay, so let me switch screens here to my read-in mode, because I do think this is really interesting. Let me, all right. Share, there we go. All right. It's not the highlighted part that has something to do with us. Some of us doing. Okay, so this is Second Peter chapter 3. By the way, Second Peter is one of those books that you could read in, an hour. I mean, the whole thing's only 3 chapters, and the chapters are not particularly long. But so check this out. We'll starting in verse 14 here. So then, dear friends, this is right at the end of his letter. He says, "So then, dear friends, since you're looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with him meaning Christ. Bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation, just as our dear brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom that God gave him." So, first, he's saying that Paul's wisdom was a gift from God. So, he establishes that right there. But it goes further than that. He writes the same way in all his letters. So now he's invoking that all of Paul's letters are God given wisdom. But it goes even further. Speaking in them on these matters, his letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort. So, distortion of Scripture, really, never seen that in recent times, particularly distortion of some of the things of Paul, like when he talks about women speaking out in church, and people misunderstand some of the context and stuff like that. But listen to this. So, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do with other scriptures to their own destruction. So, he's talking about the distortion of Paul's work, and then he goes on to say, just like they do with other scripture, meaning that Paul's works are indeed scripture. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that Peter is clearly suggesting that all the writings of Paul are in fact scripture. Now, this Mormon person pushed back, suggesting that Second Peter was not written by Peter. Now, this is a common argument, not specifically to Second Peter, but a common argument in order to try to discredit various things from the New Testament, is to say that the books were written anonymously and that we don't really know who wrote them. And we may assign different, like, if you look at the Gospel of Luke, it doesn't ever say in the Gospel of Luke that a guy named Luke wrote it. Same thing with the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of John, all this stuff. It says over and over and over, it does not list the author. Well, in the Gospels, that's true. But in the epistles, it's a very different story, because, see, the difference between the Gospels and the epistles is the Gospels are historical text. Think about if you were to pick up, an analysis of World War II, right? And so you read the analysis of World War II, which is a historical text. You're not likely to find the author's name within the text, because the text isn't about the author. It's not written in first person by the author. It's the author collated this information and put it together in the form of an educational document. And so, obviously, if you have the book, it'll have the author's name on the spine of the book, but it's not going to have the author's name inside the actual text itself, unless the author is very much full of themselves. But the epistles, what we refer to the epistles, are not texts in that they're not put together as historical documents in the same way that the Gospels are. These are actually letters written from someone to someone. Generally speaking, the most of the time, the title of the letter is either the name of the author of the letter or the name of the recipient of the letter, right? So the book, we called the book, but the letter of Romans is a letter from Paul to the church in Rome. Now, how do we know that's accurate? Because in the letter, Paul acknowledges himself, and he also talks about who he's writing to. So we can tell that it is from Paul to Rome. So, What does all this have to do with the book of Second Peter? Well, what I think is really interesting is that if you go back to Second Peter 1:1, you find a very interesting statement. So let's rewind 2 chapters. This is the very first thing in this book. Simon Peter, a servant and apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who, through the righteousness of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, have received a faith as precious as ours, grace and peace be yours in abundance as though knowledge of God, or through the knowledge of God and Jesus our Lord. That is a what we like to call in fancy techno speak a greeting from the author of this letter, a guy named Simon Peter, who you may know is the original leader of the church, the person that Jesus said, so called gave the king's keys of the kingdom. That basically said that Peter had ultimate authority on earth. So, in order to say that the writings of Paul are not, in fact, Scripture, it would mean you'd have to reject the word of Peter. Okay, but what if you say, well, maybe Peter wasn't, come on, it's Peter. What kind of a. But here's the problem is that if you go back, you would have to reject at least 3 of the 4 Gospels in order to suggest that Peter didn't have, even if this is the fun part. Even if Peter did not have the inspired word of God when he wrote this letter, he had authority. If you believe what the Gospels say, Peter absolutely had the authority to declare that what Paul said was Scripture. And that authority came directly from the mouth of Jesus. So in order to reject Paul, you'd have to reject Peter. And in order to reject Peter, you have to reject Jesus. And if you're going to reject Jesus, why are we even having this discussion? You're not a Christian, obviously. So, and so when I threw that at my Mormon friend that I was having the discussion with, they refused to continue the conversation. Which is too bad. I was actually really enjoying our conversation up to that point. Anyway, so sorry for the long-winded roundabout thing talking about this stuff, but yeah. Heard some suggestions from people who actually think that the Earth has too few people, that countries like China and India actually inflate their population numbers. Well, it's not that countries like China and India inflate their. We know what the population of these nations are. The problem, but I do think that. Well, I don't think that we're like in crisis mode just yet. I think that a deflating population is not necessarily a good thing. China is experiencing a serious problem right now because some people may remember they implemented a one-child policy for a long time. And since culturally boys were preferred over girls, what was happening was many times families that had the means to would, if someone got pregnant, they would do the old ultrasound thing. If it turned out it was a girl, we'll get an abortion. So all of a sudden, China not only had a greatly reduced birth rate because for every couple, that's every 2 people, you could only have 1 child. So if you did this to perfection, and if everybody got married in 1 generation, that would cut the population in half, right? So, and so and China was concerned about overpopulation, as many people are. So. So the problem is that if you drastically reduce the population through something like that, and further through artificial selection, you push the population heavily towards males over females, then you are going to make it more difficult for future generations to even maintain a survivable population base. Because what happens is you need to have especially like we're running into this problem in the United States with things like Social Security, Medicare, other benefits programs, is that the fewer young people you have, the more difficult it is to support your elderlies, right? So, as the Gen Xers become retired, people in my generation are starting to reach retirement age, and so as they're retiring, there are not enough millennials and Gen Zers to necessarily support them. And guess what happens when the millennials retire? They're screwed, right? Because and so so we gotta that's something to seriously consider. So the Chinese government rescinded their one child policy, but the damage has been done to some extent. So China's population is not as robust as it once was, but they still outnumber us by a huge factor. Guerrilla says China isn't that strong. We shut down all their radar and surface to air missiles that they sent to Venezuela. You really think that Venezuela is us defeating the Chinese? And the problem is, I would agree that for the most part, American military technology is, I would say, probably superior to everybody else in the world. Certainly superior to, like historically, our number one rivals have always been Russia. And we've always been ahead of the curve compared to them. Chinese military is sometimes a little harder to quantify, but let's say hypothetically that China is only on par with Russia. I think China is ahead of Russia as far as tech, but let's just say that they're only on par with Russia, and so our tech is at least a magnitude superior to theirs. That is definitely an advantage in a one-to-one fight. But the problem, what you're not considering, Gorilla, is that it's not a one-to-one fight. And you don't win wars with superior air power. Superior air power grants you dominance in the opening assault of a war, for sure. Like if you look at Operation Desert Storm, our shock and awe campaign was quite the sight to behold. But Iraq also didn't really have a significant air force. They had no real defense and no counterattack ability. And when we marched in, our forces were far superior. Not just the fact that hey we had better guns. It was that we had better training, we had superior numbers, and we had better guns. And so even the vaunted Republican Guard of Saddam Hussein were just like, yeah, we quit. No, thank you. We don't want to fight you. Because they knew that if they put up a fight against the invading American force, they would die, right? And that's why we managed to defeat the military of Saddam Hussein rather quickly. But China is a different matter because while the Chinese military may still not have any better equipment than even what Iraq had, although I would argue they do. I think their tanks are superior to what Iraq had. I think that their surface-to-surface missiles and stuff like that are superior to what Iraq had, all that. But even if their military equipment was only on par with what Iraq had, they outnumber us several magnitudes, right? And if they implemented one of their emergency draft laws, they would outnumber us well over 10 to 1. And wars are ultimately not won with fighter planes and tanks. They're won with soldiers. And if you have a 10 to 1 ratio over the other team, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to overcome that. And that's part of the reason why no invading force, including the Chinese, could possibly invade the United States. Because if push came to shove, you have 250 to 300 million Americans who would willingly take up a weapon against an invading force. Whereas if you were to invade a lot of countries, people would just sit in their homes and let the military fight it out. But it's particularly if you try, and even if, like, let's say the Canada was part of this unholy alliance against the United States, and so China brought in their entire military and invaded across the Canadian border. That would probably be the most effective strategy. That's the strategy I would use if I were trying to invade the United States, because the northern states, like the midwestern states, there, while you have plenty of people that would be willing to fight, the population is relatively sparse, and so you'd be able to overwhelm them. As far as the Northeast and the West Coast, they're not going to put up much of a fight in comparison to when you get to the American South. You are screwed because every man, woman, and child is going to be taking up arms against you, and it's just going to be like you man. Good luck trying to invade Atlanta or Nashville, right? And you move into those types of areas where everyone is either armed or you have people that have enough weapons to give everyone multiple weapons. You ain't getting anywhere. And it's that whole thing. That's why the reason that a bunch of rednecks with hunting rifles could defeat the Chinese military is the same reason the Chinese military could defeat our military. Just too many of them. To make countries appear more intimidating than they really are. As far as bolstering numbers, like I said, China and India really do have a huge chunk of population. India is not really much of a threat, and honestly, neither is China. People worry about China, but China is more interested in financial conquest than anything else. And right now, they're doing a good job of it. Which is why, it's kind of funny because China, and this is where Trump is making a huge mistake with some of his tariff policies, is that since we're pissing off a whole lot of people around the world, guess what? Now China's selling cars in Canada. And China is selling electric cars that are superior to American electric cars. Talking about technology now. And Americans can't get them. And I think that's too bad because because of the price difference, like you can if you were in China, you could buy a car equivalent to mine for like half of what I paid for it. So you better believe I would buy that car if I had a choice because my bills are too high. I want to have low cost alternatives. You might say, "Oh, it's un-American not wanting to buy a Ford or a Chevy." Well, yeah, you can say it's un-American all day long, but when Social Security is only giving people a pittance, then you have to live within your means. It's also strange that Trump backed off and changed his mind about military involvement in what Iran is doing to the protesters there. We don't really know what the actual death toll is now. Well, I don't know why Trump backed off, except that maybe he realized that, if he wants to continue bragging about being the president that's all about peace, that he probably shouldn't start picking fights with everybody, and he's already picked a couple of fights. Stan says, I agree speed limits are too low for modern cars. But here's the problem there. And I would agree. Like, my car it's not brand spanking new. I mean, it's like 3 years old now, but it's modern technology. It handles, like a modern car and everything. And so that 45 mile per hour speed limit, I could easily drive that road 55, 60 miles an hour, except for slowing down maybe for the curves, right? That would not be difficult for me at all. That's not what speed limits are designed for, though. And this is as much as Americans hate to think about the community, right? We're all about independence. We're all about what's good for me as opposed to what's good for us. However, sometimes we do have to yield to what is good for us. Sometimes the needs of the many really do outweigh the needs of the few. And when it comes to speed limits, it's not about you, it's about everybody. So you may be a professional driver driving a state-of-the-art car, and so you could drive that 45 mile per hour speed limit road at 70 with no problem whatsoever. But that speed limit is designed for Grandma Jones that's driving a 1972 Plymouth. And you might think that's not fair, but guess what? There are plenty of 1972 Plymouths out there on the road. And so we have to accommodate the lowest common denominator. The only way to get the speed limits universally risen would be to have a program where the government was saying, okay, if you got a car that's older than 10 years, we'll upgrade it for free or something. That's not going to happen. And so until everybody's driving a modern car, you can't put speed limits based on modern car capabilities. The speed limit has to be based on what a typical, I would even say, lower side of average car can handle, and a lower than average driver can handle in that lower than average car. So, yes, the speed limits are too low. If you happen to be driving a brand new car and you are physically sharp enough to handle driving at high speed. Trustin in the house says, just finished my church's live stream and thought I'd drop into the stream. Well, good to see you as always, Trustin. The only time America and China went to war was during the Korean War. Yeah, and the Chinese cleaned our clocks. Look up the Tet Offensive. Top Gear proved that the government speed limits were based on required stopping distances. That's a big part of it, yes. You have to, and again, it comes down to stopping distance, reaction time, and by the way, stopping on a curve is different than stopping if you're going in a straight line. And requires a different level of skill, which is why many times you'll see, those yellow marker signs saying slow down for the curve to 30 miles an hour. And you're like, I can't do this curve at 50. But the interesting thing about those signs is that, and this, a lot of people don't even, it's so funny. People don't even know what the signs mean anymore these days. So if you see a black and white speed limit sign, that is telling you the absolute, this is how fast you can drive. So, for example, the road I'm talking about that's near me, black and white speed limit sign says speed limit 45 miles per hour. So that means that as fast as you are allowed to drive on this road is 45 miles per hour. So then there's a set of curves a couple miles down the road that are fairly sharp turns. And when you're approaching them, there's one of those yellow signs with the picture of the car swerving, and it says slow 30 miles per hour, right? That is not a speed limit sign. What that's saying is that is the recommended speed for those curves. So the speed limit is still 45 miles per hour. So as long as you're going 45 or under, you are not breaking the law. But it's recommending that you slow down to 30 miles per hour for these curves. And that's where, depending on your skill and the make and model of your car, you have some leeway. But when it comes to the actual speed limit, I think people should follow them. Let's see. But stopping distance are using stats from cars in the 1970s. I don't know if that's true or not, because I will tell you that there's a road near me. It goes in between the cities of Murfreesboro and Smyrna. And they recently rebuilt an entire stretch of road. And the road it's about 5 miles of completely brand new. It went from a 2-lane road to a divided 4-lane road. So basically 2 lanes in each direction separated by a median. And the curves are not as sharp as they were. And during the original speed limit was 30 miles per hour. So after they finished construction, they raised the speed limit to 35 and then 40 and then finally 45 after all their studies were done. The speed limit on that stretch of road is now 45, except for at the very beginning of that stretch of road where it went from 30 to 40. And so I don't think that they're using data from the 1970s. Now, it might be that if you're talking about a road that speed limit hasn't changed since the 1970s, sure. New cars can stop in like half the distance as the cars used to. Actually, here's the funny thing. It's not entirely true. It's partially true. Some new cars can stop faster than they could in the 1970s, but some of the newer cars, especially, cars, construction of cars is funny. But if let's take. I wonder if there's a study on it. Let's see. Instance for cars today versus. Let's see. Modern car, yeah, because there are ABS brakes and stuff like that. Okay, stopping roughly half the distance from 40 to 50 years ago. Well, I guess that is, man, I can't believe how old I am. Improved technologies, 300 feet in the mid 20th century to around 120 to 140 feet today. In the 1930s to 1960s, it took 300, it was about 300 feet. Since 2000, it's 120 to 140 feet. It's funny, it doesn't say anything about the 70s. But which is funny because that's when cars really started to change, was in the 1970s. But ABS brakes didn't exist yet, but cars started becoming, were designed a lot differently. Yeah. So you're probably right. As far as the stopping distance on average, seems like it's roughly half of what it was. However, I would still argue that, I see cars from the 1960s out there today. Heck, I see cars from the 1950s, sometimes from the 1940s out there today. Speed limits also implemented during the energy crisis here in America. Well, actually, Robert, too, you're right and you're wrong. Speed limits on the freeways. There was Jimmy Carter, I believe, was signed into law a national speed limit of 55 miles per hour. So that meant that on the freeways, the speed limit was limited to 55 miles per hour. Before that, it was whatever the individual states wanted to post. And there were some areas where there were no speed limits, particularly on long stretches of road when you're going across the desert in Arizona or Texas, right? However, Jimmy Carter passed the 55 mile per hour speed limit to conserve gasoline because driving, now, and this is another, it's a technology limitation, but back then, if you're driving at speeds over 55 miles per hour, you're burning more gas, right? And if you're going under 55 miles per hour, you end up burning more gas. So 55 miles per hour is like the sweet spot for cars back then. That nowadays, that's actually it depends on the type of car you're at. Like for example, for an electric car like mine, that sweet spot is around 60 to 65 miles per hour. Like I can definitely tell the difference in the efficiency of my car if I push it to 70. I lose mileage. However, the interesting thing is, it's unlike with cars of the past. If I go stop and go city speeds, I actually do just as well as I do on the freeway at lower speeds because electric cars are much more efficient in stop and go traffic than their gas burning counterparts. But they lose efficiency to wind resistance at high speed, which is why, like I said, if I go much past 60 miles per hour, I can definitely see the drain on my battery. So the design of cars is different. The type of fuel makes a difference as far as preserving energy. But the energy crisis only affected freeway speeds. Jimmy Carter had no say over speed limits on state roads, which included city streets. And so that was still regulated by the local authorities. And there are a lot of speed limits that existed before the energy crisis and have existed since, and most of them are relatively unchanged. What if USA controlled all the Americas and Antarctica? Well, Trump probably would like that. Would that be ultimately a good thing? Well, first of all, Antarctica, now granted, Trump has not been real big on honoring treaties, but Antarctica is the one area that has this interesting international treaty that says that no one can own it. Basically, it's the world's largest international nature preserve. And so people can go there for scientific research and stuff like that. You can fly over it if you're on an airline going from like Australia to South America or something. You can cruise around it on a cruise ship, but you can't own it. So Antarctica, I would say, is off the table. But as far as like if the United States had control of the entire Western Hemisphere, so everything from Canada, the United States, Central and South America, well, I think the MAGA people would hate that because suddenly white people would become a tiny minority, because Latino Americans would become a super majority. And so the official language it would be debated as to whether it should be Spanish or Portuguese. So, but economically, we would be unstoppable. Not to mention, we'd have some of the best vacation spots on the planet, so. Yeah, you figure you never stop producing no guns. However, how many guns get thrown out? New guns aren't replacing old guns, they're adding to the pile. Yeah, most people don't throw away firearms, except for when they do gun buyback programs. But and that's the thing. Like you have most gun collectors. I know a guy that has like rifles dating back to like the Civil War. Right? People like to collect weapons of different eras, and but yeah, firearms typically are recycled. However, when they are disposed of. Because people don't want to just throw a gun in the garbage because some kid might find it and do something bad. But yeah, a lot of times people will buy, like if you buy, Smith and Wesson 45, and then you decide you want a 38, you're probably going to just put the 45 in your gun safe, or whatever. You know, which why you would have anything other than a 45, I don't know. Let's see. That too, and old cars would start shaking apart at 90 miles an hour, while new cars are rock solid at 100. Depends on the new car again, and it also because a sustained 100 mile per hour drive is dangerous in a new car as well. And you're also overestimating, and this is a real problem. Yes, new cars tend to travel smoother than old cars, and the reason old cars would shake at night. By the way, that's kind of a myth. If you had a well-maintained car in the 1970s, you could drive at 100 miles per hour and be rock solid. What you needed was to have the car properly aligned, and new cars the same part. Like my car, because driving around doing the Uber thing, I have to hit a lot of speed bumps because I drive through a lot of parking lots, and apartment complexes are obsessed with putting speed bumps everywhere. Well, that can knock your alignment out a little bit. And after a while, my car, when I hit 70 miles an hour, the car would vibrate a little bit. Kind of reminded me of when I was a kid in the 1970s and your car would start shaking at a certain speed. So I took it in and they got the front end aligned and now it's fine. And front end alignments are just a lot easier and cheaper than they were in the 1970s because we have digital tools and stuff that we didn't have back then to do a more precise alignment. But it wasn't that the cars weren't built solid. In fact, most cars back then were built far superior than the cars today. We just didn't have the tools to make them as precise. But yeah, I think that the other problem though is that so cars today tend to be smoother in your operations, and so people get overconfident. And I will tell you, you drive into a brick wall at 100 miles per hour in a 2026 car, you're just as dead. Let's see. Gorilla says, What do you think would scare our enemies when they hear we are sending the? Who do you think would scare our enemies when we hear we are sending the Alabama rednecks, Florida man, or the Appalachia boys? Well, we wouldn't be sent. That's the problem. We can't send them, but they would defend. And so that's where I say, like, if in fact if you had a conflict between China and the United States, whoever, basically, home field is going to win in either case. And in fact, I would say this: United States loses unless it's on our own turf. But even then, it's not our military that's going to win the day. It's the rednecks and Florida men and the Appalachia boys. They're the ones that are going to win the war, not the United States military. Might need to pull the Speedo out. It's supposed to get up to 56 today. Well, if you start running around wearing a Speedo, I want to see a video. Superman versus the Daleks. Well, the Daleks are so inconsistently written. In the original appearance of the Daleks, you know how they defeated them? Normal human beings defeated the Daleks by tipping them over. Like, cow tipping. They literally just tipped them over because the way that the Daleks powered their armored suits was through electrified plating on the floor. And so if they tipped them over, now they weren't making contact with the floor and their suits lost power. But then you get to like newer Doctor Who, and the Daleks are flying around space and vaporizing planets with, but Superman can take just about anything that anybody can throw. So I would say that if it's old school Daleks, like anything before the newer Doctor Who series, then Superman wins easily. If it's the new Daleks, then it could go either way, but I would still give Superman an edge. So each trip took 8 hours to complete. I'm not sure what I'm assuming you're talking about the speed, but I'm not sure where you're talking about driving from and to. Just tell the Israelites to stay away from the base of the mountain. Moses seems like he kept his cool. I don't know if I would have been able to. Just to tell the Israelites to stay away from the base of the mountain. Moses seems like he kept his cool. I don't know if I would have been able to. Well, you're not a prophet. And, yeah. Nowadays, people just go into church, or don't show up when certain sporting events are going on. The pastor of the church I attended in Virginia did a sermon about that subject. Oh, people just what, they don't go to church because sporting events or whatever. Our church has a very loyal membership, but and Corey does talk about this every now and then. We only see an attendance drop once a year, and that's when football season starts. It's pathetic, really. But if you consider yourself, I don't care what religion you are, if you're Christian or Muslim or Jew or Hindu or Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or whatever, right? If you are willing to not go to church for convenience. Now, I'm not talking about the occasional, hey, we're spending 2 weeks in another country on vacation. I'm not talking about, you're sick or you have a family emergency. I'm talking about either you don't feel like going, or there's a big game on, or you just want to go out and get something to eat, right? If you're willing to give up church for something that is a pure convenience, then quite frankly, you should not call yourself a practicer of that religion because you don't take it seriously. If you believe that there's some supernatural aspect to life, but you're willing to put it on the back burner, man, what is that saying? Right. But when people do attend church on certain sporting events and being with others, all that God has done for you, you can't even give an hour to your time and attention. Yeah, well, that's kind of pathetic. And but the thing is, and this is another big part of the problem, is let's say you go to church every single week without fail. Let's say you've never missed a church service in your life, but outside of that hour or two on Saturday or Sunday, you don't even give God a second thought, it still means nothing to you. I don't believe that going trick or treating on Halloween makes you a Satanist, and I don't believe that going to church on Christmas makes you a Christian. God does take issue with believers that puts anything worldly before him. Sporting events are of the world. Well, yeah, pretty much everything is of the world. So just like Winter Olympics going on right now, I really could care less. Well, if you could care less, that means you do care. It's you couldn't care less. I'm a nitpicker on that one. And my favorite independent tiger of them all, the best tiger to not be on a cereal box. Indy Tiger is in the house. I haven't talked to you in forever, and I'm a terrible friend. I know I've been dealing with a lot of stuff, but you know, I'm sorry. But Indy Tiger is here. Says, "Where are you in Virginia?" And so, talking to Robert. Maybe Indy Tiger and Robert are going to get together. That'll be interesting. You know, I don't remember what do you call it again? It's not Messianic Christian, but whatever it is, and an atheist get together. I would love to sit in on that meal. And good morning, all. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Indy Tiger. I hope you are still here so that you could see how excited I am that you are, in fact, still here. Robert says, I am no longer living in Virginia. I haven't for several years. South Carolina, I'm in, so sorry for you, Indy Tiger. With your new laws, the Democrats are passing and trying to get passed in Virginia. Yeah, that's why I know I said this, I think on Friday. There is no political party that I have respect for right now. It just isn't. I think if you could afford it, I'd leave Virginia. Not everybody hates it there, by the way. Death by Rabies in the house. Another one I haven't talked to in a little while. Good morning, brother. I've missed you. Been really busy with work lately. But I'm still your number one fan. Much love. Good job. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you so much, Death by Rabies. I am also thrilled to have you here as well. And Stan says the wars are won with power armor in Alaska. Okay. Well, we'll see how that goes. And Bill Phillips, also in the house. Why is the defensive side of the Great Wall of China facing inwards towards China? Well, don't know. I don't really know that much about the Great Wall. I didn't know is there a defensive side? I suppose there should be because I don't know how the structure of the wall works and everything. But maybe it had to do with the borders at the time that it was built. I don't know. Though, how much of a chance would China stand, though? Whatever was his new secret weapon the military used when they went to Venezuela that shut down their electronic monitoring systems? Well, first of all, I don't know how much truth there is to that because I don't believe pretty much anything that the administration says about that kind of thing. But let's say we did have some kind of super secret uber weapon that shut down all electronics. We still lose. You don't understand the power of numbers. Only like the $50,000 Chinese cars, I think. Well, the thing is, though, is the $50,000 Chinese car is the equivalent of a $100,000 American car. In fact, I saw a thing on, I can't remember the name of the channel now, but these guys that drag race all sorts of different cars. And they put a Tesla Model S Plaid, which cost something like $115,000, against a $38,000 Chinese car, and the Chinese car won. Guess we'll at least see if they're actually reliable. You're talking about the Chinese cars. Indy says, "Thank you, Abigail Spanberger is trying to copy California. Problem is so many businesses are leaving California. Yeah, a lot of people leaving. In-N-Out Burger has left California, and they were a California staple for generations. But In-N-Out Burger, I mean, they still have their individual restaurants open, but their corporate headquarters is now in Franklin, Tennessee, and In-N-Out Burgers are popping up like weeds around Tennessee. They already selling, or are they already selling those same Chinese cars in Europe? I'm not sure about the European market. I just saw a little thing, a blurb about them selling them in Canada. And like I said, I wish that we could buy them here. And the funny thing is, let me say something about the whole unfair competition thing, right? Because people say, "Well, wait a minute. The Chinese put out a electric car for 10 grand or less, right? And American cars start." American electric cars, the cheapest of the cheap is like 20, 25 grand, right? So that's totally unfair competition. The Chinese, we need to tariff them and we need to keep them out of the market, blah, 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 so the American companies have a chance. History proves that's patently false. For those of you that are old like me, which I know there aren't that many of you, but I know there's at least a couple of you, back in the 1970s, we had something that was loosely referred to as the energy crisis, in which gas soared in price, where it eventually got to over $1 a gallon. Which, keep in mind, at the beginning of the 70s, paying 30 cents a gallon was expensive. Now, people dream of those days. But at any rate, so gas was going way up in price, and American cars were awesome, but they were also land yachts. They were big, they were bulky, they were heavy, and they had big engines in them. And a lot of people love them, but guess what? They also drank a lot of gas, right? A typical American car would get 5 to 8 miles per gallon. So in comes a little company called Datsun. Datsun starts making a car called the B210. The Datsun B210 got an astonishing 30 miles per gallon. How did they do this? It was lightweight. It was a tiny little car in comparison to these giant American boats. And it was also a lot cheaper than American cars. So I don't remember what the prices were back then, because if an American car cost $5,000, the B210 would have been like 3,000. It was a lot cheaper, about the equivalent of these Chinese electric cars. And so Datsun started importing them like crazy because Americans were buying them like crazy. Now, there was a growing concern that the American auto industry would completely collapse because Ford and GM and all these guys could not possibly compete with these cheaper, lighter Japanese cars. And what in the world were we going to do? The Datsun B210 was going to take over the market. And you know what? The Datsun B210 did take over the market in a very real way. Datsuns became incredibly popular. And by the way, the Datsun company is still around today. It's just not called Datsun anymore. They were bought out by another company called Nissan. And but Datsun, we had a Datsun pickup when I was a kid, and everything made by Datsun was fairly reliable, lightweight, and got way better mileage than everything American. So Ford and Chevy and all these guys started losing a lot of sales. And so people were like, yep, that's it. American auto industry is going bye-bye. But guess what? Ford and GM and stuff, some of the companies like Chrysler, yeah, they're kind of gone, but Ford and GM are still going strong. And how? They adapted. It took them years to do it, but they started making cars that were got just as good a mileage, were just as lightweight, and they tried to improve on them. And so we ended up with things like the Ford Escort, right? And so American car companies started making cars to fit what Americans needed. And so if China starts selling $10,000 electric cars in the United States tomorrow, I don't think that Ford and GM and Tesla are going to go out of business. But I do think that in a few years, Ford and GM and Tesla are going to start selling $10,000 electric cars, because it's so funny because all these people, especially people who call themselves conservatives, but the MAGA movement is anything but conservative. But people who call themselves conservatives like to say that capitalism is a self-correcting system, that the thing that keeps prices under control in a capitalist society like ours is competition. So competition is ultimately a good thing. However, as soon as that competition comes from China, we don't want competition. But the reason that American cars, and by the way, Japanese cars and European cars are so expensive, because there's no competition. Heck, most of these companies are working with each other to develop the next models, right? So if you have a car that's being developed by Ford and Honda, another car being developed by Honda and Toyota, and another car being developed by Toyota and GM, all of this is real, by the way, that's actually happening, then of course the prices are going to be the same. But all of a sudden, China comes along and says, hey, we'll sell you a car for less than half. Right? What happens? That's a wake-up call to the American car companies that we better make cheaper cars. We better figure out what they're doing right so that we can make cars as cheap as they do so we can compete. And that's what happened. It took the United States a decade to adapt to the Japanese invasion of the 70s. But they did it. And today, American cars are just as good as Japanese cars. But during the 80s, American cars went through some tough times. And I think that, we need to shake up the industry. I'm okay with shaking up the industry. Trump bragged that he won on Iran and he held off on invasion because Iran agreed not to hang a whole bunch of people. Well, Trump claims he wins everything. I don't, whatever. Robert says we are true and they're talking about the politics of there that I don't know. Yes, we can. We can take a tyrannical government at their word. No, I don't think so. Well, yeah, tyranny. Unfortunately, here's the. Yeah. I never thought that I would distrust the government as much as I do now. Design speeds for roads over 25 miles per hour are only 5 miles per hour over the posted speed. Design speeds for roads over 25 miles per hour are only 5 miles per hour above the posted speed. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. I wonder what the stats are on the age of cars currently on the road. Even a 20-year-old car built in the early 2000s. That's true, but a 20-year-old car not properly maintained is not going to perform as well as a 2-year-old car. Well, it's a maximum speed. The old Plymouth can drive slower, except that that's the problem. You're assuming that people are going to actually drive what is safe. They don't. The funny thing is, like, if the posted speed is 45 miles per hour, if you actually follow the speed limit, which I try to, I'm not perfect, but I try to almost always follow the speed limit. I usually set the cruise control in my car to exactly the speed limit. Well, technically, I set my cruise control to 1 mile per hour over the speed limit because my speedometer is 1 mile per hour off. I calibrated it. But if you go exactly the speed limit, people get mad at you. But you know what? You're passing nobody. Nobody's driving below the speed limit unless they are drunk or illegal immigrants. Tet offensive to Vietnam. You're right. Not Tet. I'm trying to think. What was it called? I'm forgetting the name of it. Gorilla says censored. Oh, you're talking about the Epstein files now. Stopping sight difference. Stopping sight distance. Oh, that's right. Indy is a civil engineer. Intersection, sight distance, vertical curve distance, reaction time. They are all used to keep you from getting into an accident. Correct. But people want to hear, but my car can go faster. Half the stopping distance, we should have twice the speed limit, not depending on the curve. And you know what? Half the stopping distance doesn't mean you've halved your reaction time. And here you go. Not when reaction is twice as slow as they used to be. The U.S. have a treaty. I'm not sure with whom. It looks like you're coming up on that. Just like the new 2026 Corvette, 220 mile per hour top, maintain top speed. Who really needs a car that fast, especially with how many of our roads in America are so outdated? Well, yeah. Look, do we need cars that go 200 miles per hour? No, we do not. However, on the flip side, do we need to cap the speeds of cars? I don't think so. I don't think that that's. I think that's government intrusion too much. Because if you have a genuine emergency and you're a competent driver, there might be a circumstance where you need to drive 200 miles per hour. And I don't like one thing about electric cars. Most electric cars have artificial limited speed. Because electric cars could go way faster, but the manufacturers just say, yeah, we'll cap it at whatever they think is safe. However, yeah, do you need a car that goes that fast? No, but if you can afford it, I don't care. But if you're going 220 miles per hour down the freeway, then I'm mixed on this. But I think there's an argument to be made for kill switches being mandatory. To where if I think that even though I know people would hate the idea, because how dare the government have that kind of control, but if police could in fact safely disable any car with a kill switch of some kind, that would prevent a lot of death. U.S. has treaty with Denmark from the early 1900s. It states we can build in Greenland for defensive purposes. Oh yeah, I knew that. And a $5 super chat from Indy. Thank you so much, my friend. I cannot thank you enough because, boy, do I need it. So what I mean is a posted limit of 45 miles per hour is a design speed of 50 miles per hour. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, they put in a 5 mile per hour cushion there. But unfortunately, and this is the problem. I think a lot of people just go, well, I drive 5 miles per hour over the speed limit because of things like that, or because they won't pull me over unless I'm going more than 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, and you know that's I have I honestly I have a zero tolerance policy for speeders. If I were the mayor of a city or the governor of a state or the president of the United States, I would want to issue an edict immediately that if the posted speed limit is 45 and you're going 46, you're getting a ticket. I'm debating on getting a 2005 Grand Am. I love my 1996 and 2001 Grand Ams I had, but Pontiac is no longer around. So if I wanted parts, I would have to go to salvage yards. Yeah, I would probably hesitate before buying a car from a manufacturer that no longer exists. I have a friend who wouldn't mind Levitical law being passed in America. I'm not saying that God changes or anything, but he's clearly given the church more occasion for mercy than Leviticus. Well, keep in mind, Levitical law, a lot of it is, and this we've been going through Leviticus, and I know keep putting off the last two chapters, but Levitical law, in large part, is specifically for the Levites. That's why it's called Leviticus, because the Levites were the priests, right? Every priest in Israel was a direct descendant of Aaron, Moses' brother, and they were the tribe of Levi. And so if you are not a Levi, then a lot of the Levitical law does not apply, period, not even to the Jews from 5,000 years ago. However, and then another large part of the Levitical law, you follow anyway. Basic hygiene laws and stuff like that. A lot of it is just common sense by today's standards. But back then, things like germ theory and stuff didn't exist. People didn't think about the fact that you needed to sanitize a place that was infected with mold, right? So they wrote that into the law. And other laws that had to do with things like mixing of fabrics or and stuff like that were also contextually relevant then, but not so much today. And again, it was for the preservation of the Jewish people. So, when you're talking about God changing, no, it's not about God changing. The Levitical law was written specifically for the Jews of, like 4,500 years ago. And then that was updated by Christ with a much more simple version of how the law works about 2,000 years ago. I haven't been on your channel for a long time, so no worries about talking. I know, but dude, I owe you so much, and I really, really appreciate your friendship, and I feel really bad because I've been so negligent. But man, I've been going through some stuff. I wouldn't mind talking to you, but man, I could burn your ear for hours just trying to tell you about all the crap I've been going through lately. But I am excited, and so just so you know, Indy, since I haven't had a chance to talk to you, and assuming you weren't here on Friday or was it last week? Last week, I think, was it when I announced it. Yeah, last Sunday. Is that I am, hopefully this summer, if not this fall, I will become the world's oldest freshman, and I will be taking astrophysics. So it's going to take me quite a while, but I'm going to be going for my PhD in astrophysics over the next several years. Just like new proposed billionaire tax we're trying to get passed in California, Zuckerberg has already said he's leaving and moving to Florida. Yeah, I think that. So let me put this in perspective. Do I believe in a tax specifically geared towards any specific class of people? Absolutely not, right? So I think the idea of a billionaire tax or a millionaire tax is disgusting and should not be implemented. That being said, I also agree with the point that many Democrats make that the rich do not pay their fair share. So I'm not saying that tax laws don't need to be updated and adjusted. But I don't think that creating a tax just for them is the solution. I think that I do believe in something called equal protection, part of the Constitution. Everybody is to be treated equally under the law, but that's not the case. So I would start by eliminating any and all progressive and regressive taxation, right? So when it comes to personal income tax, if the tax rate is 15%, if you make $100, you pay $15. If you make $150 million, or you make $100 million, to be simple, you pay $15 million, right? It's a 15% tax on everything you make, period. However, and this is going to piss off some people, I would also implement a 15% capital gains tax, which means that if you make your money from investing, you're going to pay 15% of that. And by the way, it's not going to be offset by your losses. That's not how it works. If you take a loss, you take a loss. But if you get a gain, you pay 15%. Period. End of discussion. And that doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to keep it in my little account here so that it doesn't realize until I withdraw it. No, as soon as you sell that stock, it's a gain. All right? So 15% on capital gains. I would put in a 15% corporate tax, and that would not be and again because and I want people to think about this. And thank you again. Another super chat from Indie Tiger because he's just made of money, just so you know. So I'm waiting for that $500 super chat there, Indy. Uh, that's a joke. It was a joke, people. But with a $10 super chat says, "Congratulations on going back to university. Very excited for you." I'm excited and terrified, Indy. I truly, I am. I'm looking forward to it. All right, so back to the taxation thing. So you have a 15% personal income tax. You have a 15% capital gains tax. You have a 15% corporate tax. Now, keep in mind, and this is something that people don't think about when they think about business tax and capital gains tax. Because I know Street Preacher was asking about like realized gains or unrealized gains and stuff like that, right? So when you do your personal income taxes, do you only pay taxes on the money you get to keep after you've paid your rent and you paid for your electricity and you made your car payment? Or do you pay tax on all the money you take in? We all know the answer. You pay tax on everything you make, right? Not just your net after you've paid for your food and housing and stuff. So the same is going to be true for the corporate tax. The same is going to be true for capital gains. It is 15% on everything you make. If a company is making a profit, awesome. But you know what? If they're not making a profit, they still pay 15% on what they take in. Because and this is how many companies manipulate the tax system, is because they make it look like they're not making a profit. So even though they're a company that takes in $18 billion this year, they're paying taxes on 183 bucks, right? Not going to happen. So, but you make the percentage fairly low, so it's not going to cripple industry if it is 15% is probably kind of high. It would probably end up being closer to 10% because keep in mind the reason the tax rates are so high is not because that's like I think on the higher on upper income, I think it's still in like like close to 50%. I know it used to be in the 90s, right, as far as percentile of income, but I don't. It might be in the 30s. Let me double check. Highest tax rate in U.S. So currently, 37%. And 3.8% net investment income tax. That's a joke. Okay, so 37%. It says maximum federal tax on high income individuals can reach 40.8%. All right, so we'll just use round numbers 40%, right? So, so that means that if your income is $10 million, 40% is your tax rate, right? Do you think anybody that makes $10 million a year outside of, and by the way, there is one exception that I'll get into in just a minute, but do you think any of those people are actually paying 40%? Like, do you think that Bill Gates or Elon Musk or any of these guys, these super rich guys, and I'm not even talking about their investment income, just whatever money they make. Do you think any of them are paying anywhere near 40%? Do you think Warren Buffett is paying 40%? Warren Buffett brags about the fact that he doesn't pay anywhere near that. He doesn't pay as much taxes, percentage wise, as his legal secretary, right? So the simple fact is the reason the tax rates are so high is because nobody pays them, right? Because then you go down to the lowest tax rate, right? So, like, it looks like the lowest tax rate is currently 22%, right? Is anybody in the lower income tax brackets actually paying 22%? The answer, again, is no, because of things like personal exemption and earned income tax credit and per child tax credit and stuff like that, right? So I will tell you, like, I don't make a lot of money because I get Social Security, and Social Security doesn't pay squat. However, my tax burden last year from the federal income tax was zero. That's stupid, right? Well, now, granted, I do think that people that are receiving Social Security, that shouldn't be taxable. I don't think that anybody being paid by the government, it should be taxed because that's just redundant. But, so you have people at the bottom And by the way, my income was technically above the poverty line, which means that anybody at the poverty line or lower is paying zero tax. Most people that are making in the top 1% are also paying zero tax. That's one of the reasons the politicians are always talking about the middle class. Because you know what the middle class is? Everybody who's not in under the poverty line and not the top 1%. That way they can say it's, no matter who you are, they can say, oh yeah, middle class, middle class, middle class, right? However, nobody is paying that full amount. If you set a flat rate tax of 10%, and that 10% was on all personal income, all corporate income, and that does not mean after expenses, that means the money you take in, and all investment income. So that's your capital gains, real estate, stuff like that. And in all those cases, zero, and I mean zero exemptions whatsoever. The government would have enough money and everybody would pay their fair share. The poor would pay their fair share and the rich would pay their fair share. And by the way, I would make sure, and this would be in the Crawford tax code, no such thing as inheritance tax. I don't care if you inherit $5 or $500 billion. That money has already been taxed, at least in theory, right? And under my system, it would have been, right? Because as businesses take in revenue, they're paying tax on it. So it doesn't matter. They might be investing into the business corporate infrastructure, but they're still paying tax on it when they take in the money. That's part of the reason for that, because if a business like SpaceX is worth, $1 trillion, then they should have paid taxes to grow that big. But they don't. Because what they do is they take in the money from their government, juicy government contracts and stuff, and then they just invest it in the company so that it's not recorded as profit. The way that a lot of companies avoid taxes is by investing it into their company. And by the way, investing it into their company can also mean massive perks to their executive staff. And so, that way, if you happen to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the company may give you a corporate jet because that way the company doesn't have to pay taxes on all that money that is spent on a corporate jet. And the CEO doesn't have to pay taxes on income because it wasn't income. So you get rid of all that garbage and just they pay money on what they take in. End of story. Now, granted, the states are a whole different matter, because if California implements a billionaire tax, well, if they want all the billionaires to move out of California, that's their business. However, yeah, I don't believe in targeted taxes. Now, the other thing is there are taxes that are specifically regressive in our system. If you look at the worst and most egregious is Social Security. Social Security is a regressive tax, right? Let's see. All right, so Social Security, I wasn't 100% yet. It's 12.4% total, 6.2% paid by the employee, 6.2% paid by the employer, which is another stupid thing because it's a hidden tax. Because, it's not like the employer is going to say, well, out of the goodness of our heart, we're going to pay our fair share and not make it affect anything. No, they raise their prices and or pay you less so they can pay that 6.2%. So it's a 12% taxes. However, it's only on your earnings up to $184,500, which means that if you make $500,000 a year, $300,000 plus, no Social Security tax. And then people complain because Social Security doesn't have enough money. Well, how about this? Social Security tax is on all income. Now, we lower the tax. I probably make that so we have the 10% basic income tax. Social Security tax probably less than 5%. But it will, again, be on all income, just like the regular income tax. So corporate income, personal income, and in capital gains. 5% Social Security, period. And no, we're not turning it into an investment scheme. I know you could make more money on the stock market, but the stock market also has risk associated. And, yes, Social Security is technically could be classified as a Ponzi scheme, but I don't care. It's, but I would also reclassify Social Security that it's not a retirement program, that it's only a disability program. So, but you make it so that Social Security no longer has a cap on its collections, so it's no longer a regressive tax, and but then you can lower the rate. And let's see. And then on the flip side, so Social Security has a maximum pay, and this is another thing about Social Security is not only a regressive tax system in that you only pay for it up until $184,000 a year, but it helps people in a regressive fashion. Not because people say, oh, we don't want wealth income redistribution. Yes, we absolutely do. I'm sorry. If we're going to help people that are struggling, that's what it's going to be. I don't care what you label it as, and you can call it evil all day long, but helping out the people that need help is not evil. So, right now, you can technically get a Social Security benefit of $5,181 per month. By the way, I don't get anywhere near that because the way that you get that kind of amount is for you to have basically put in taxes based on that $184,500 for the last 35 years. So unless you're rich, you ain't getting good benefits from Social Security. But if you're I'm sorry, if you made $184,500 for the last 35 years, you don't need Social Security. Right? The people who need Social Security are the people that made significantly less than that. And guess what? They get reduced benefits because they paid less into the system. And some people say, good, that's the way it should be. Screw those poor people. Well, I'm sorry. That's backwards thinking, in my opinion. If the point, Social Security is not to help the rich, and it's to help people who are struggling. Now, specifically, it was designed as people who are struggling, who are at retirement age and or disabled. I would change that if I were dictator for a day to it only being a disability program. Because if you're able-bodied and you choose not to work, then you don't eat unless you have money. That's biblical, and I think it's actually good practice. But that's also assuming that you are 70 years old when you retire. If you're 62 years old, your maximum benefit, and this is actually closer to what I get, it's a little bit more than I make. If you're at 62, the maximum benefit is $2,969 per month. Mine is closer to $2,000 a month. But I didn't make anywhere near $184,500 when I was working, and I obviously didn't work solid for the last 35. Well, actually, probably did work close to 35 years, but that's a whole other thing. But you have to have the high earnings in order to get the max benefit. I think that's messed up. And so I think that Social Security should be based on disability only. And I would say that $5,000 a month payout, that should be like the starting point. And then there should be an adjustment based on where you live as far as cost of living in your area. So if you live in an area like Nashville, you would get a little bit more than if you lived in Timbuktu, Alabama, right? It just depends on what the cost of living is for your area. Because if we're trying to make Social Security isn't about trying to make people wealthy, but it is trying to make it so that people can go on and hopefully be at least relatively comfortable. I'm not saying they need to be living the life of luxury, but they shouldn't be like like I literally there's two medications in my array of prescriptions that I take. There's two that I currently do not take. Why? Because I can't afford them. And the reason I can't afford them, because Medicare, another broken program, doesn't cover prescriptions unless you pay them to cover prescriptions. And even then, it doesn't cover them 100%. Well, how am I supposed to pay Medicare for prescription coverage when Social Security is, giving me barely enough money to pay for my house and my car and food? That doesn't even count utilities and all that, right? How am I supposed to pay extra to Medicare when I can't even pay my basic bills? You know, so as far as Medicare, again, Medicare, like Social Security, should be for people who are disabled, not for people who are just retired. And Medicare should cover 100%. Not currently, by the way, if you go to the doctor, if you're on Medicare, I am on Medicare, unfortunately, but if you go to the doctor and you're on Medicare, Medicare doesn't just pay your doctor's bill, they pay 80% of your doctor's bill. So if you don't have some kind of Medicare supplementary plan, which again costs money, money which most people who are on Medicare don't have, so unless you have a Medicare supplementary plan, you're paying 20% of all your medical costs. Now, if you go in for an MRI, and believe me, I've had more MRIs than I can count at this point. If you go in for an MRI, you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000, right? Oh, don't worry, Medicare. Medicare will pay $800. Now you're on the hook for $200. Well, that's not a lot of money. It sure is if you're barely making enough money to pay for your house, your car, and food. That's why when you hear people saying, I'm on a fixed income, that's a real thing, people. So I get really tired of. Don't get me wrong. I believe in conservatism, but I don't like modern conservatives when they look at people who are struggling and say those people suck because they're struggling. I'm sorry. I'm on too much of a tangent there. Stan says, sorry, I think they're only allowed to say 50,000 cars in Canada. If you're talking about I don't know what the deal is, but I do know that some of those cars are available. Not sure what the Chinese cars were cost. I don't know the details of the ones they're selling in China. The $10,000 electric car I'm talking about is one that I saw that was selling in China. No idea what they're doing as far as their exports. An Orthodox church, the priest holds up the Bible and makes a sign of the cross with it. Oh, that's fine. That's a religious ritual. There's nothing in the Bible says you need to do that, but if you want to do that, I don't care. He's making a wave offering, basically, with the Bible. Don't know what a wave offering is? Read Leviticus. Don't think we'd be fighting a land war in China. We'd only want them to stay out of Taiwan. Yeah, I agree. That's the thing. Like the whole hypothetical war between the United States and China, I don't think is going anywhere because there is really no real scenario in which the United States and China is going to get into a shooting war outside of China suddenly becoming an aggressive expansionist nation, which I don't think is going to happen. The whole thing with China and Taiwan, China has been claiming forever that Taiwan is their territory and that it was, wrongfully taken from them. That's a different kind of squabble. But China is not interested in like invading Japan that's not their deal. And up until very, very recently, the United States wasn't really interested in expanding our borders either. Let's see. Some kind of emoji, it looks like a fish saying, G fish God alarm ost dinner time. So I'm not sure what that means, but okay, maybe it's dinner time for you. Robert says, no, you missed my earlier comment. Moses, at 80 years old, God asked him several times to meet with him at the top of the mountain, which was an 8-hour trip each time. Moses kept his cool and composure. Yeah, Moses but Moses was a prophet. Moses was chosen by God. And, one thing that's interesting, if you have at least if in the biblical narrative, if you are chosen by God to do something, you do not have to have the innate skills or even the physical ability to do whatever that thing is. If God has decided that you are going to go here and do this, as long as you say, okay, God, let's do it, God will give you the strength and skills necessary to do it. Moses was given everything he needed to do what he needed to do because Moses was obedient. I wouldn't mind a car that is basic and had buttons. Buy an old car. The problem with China is they get support from their party, so Chinese cars are cheaper for a reason. The party, aka the people, pay for that. Not necessarily. I think that a lot of people believe that. It, keep in mind, I do business with Chinese companies. The printer over there that is currently printing and almost done with its current project, which I made this lovely little artifact with, this Daredevil replica, which I obviously have not been sanded or painted yet, but looks pretty darn good, right? So the printer is made by a company, a Chinese company, and that Chinese company still competes on the same market as everybody else. They still pay for their materials and all that. The one advantage that Chinese companies have over most other nations is not that the government is directly supplementing the companies, more that the government is supplementing the people. Keep in mind, and you know, like when you talk to, as I have doing the Uber thing, if you talk to someone who is a Chinese national, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation I had with these students who last during the holidays they were flying home to visit their family in China, and we were talking about the differences between the United States and China, and they were pointing out that while Americans have more freedom and they have more flexibility in their lives than Chinese people do, but they will never have to worry about being homeless. They will never have to worry about having enough food because the state provides that. Well, what does that mean? If the state provides the people with basic housing and necessities of life, then when Creality hires its employees, all they have to do is pay them enough so that their disposable income makes them comfortable enough to want to work there, right? And the other thing is they have no problem getting the workforce they need because the state will say, hey, by the way, you need a job, you're going to go work for Creality. So they have no trouble getting employees. It's workers' wages that are supplemented, not necessarily the companies themselves directly. Now, is that unfair? You can argue that it is, but you know what? China's still competing with America, still competing with Europe and all that, and the Chinese economy still has to, compete. First thing U.S. automakers did was shorten the trunks as much as possible. Some weird looking U.S. cars in the late 70s. Oh, yeah. Germany World War II versus Japan World War II, where Germany was a far superior land based army, right? Their Blitzkrieg maneuver nearly conquered, Europe, and so it was very very powerful. Japan's power was more in air and sea power. So if you were to pit the two against each other, I think it would be a much more interesting scenario, but it would be based on where's the fight going to take place. Is it going to be something like when the United States went up against Japan? Like, it's a very different type of warfare. When the United States went against Germany, we and the Allies stormed Normandy Beach, and then we pushed our way in, like fighting for each piece of land as we took it. In Japan, it was island hopping. We would land on an island, clear that island of the enemy, and then land on the next island, clear that. And it was a very difficult process in both cases. So I don't know that there'd be a clear winner, but I would think the edge would go to Germany because they had a technological edge generally. All right, so it's just like many of the utilities companies pretty much have a monopoly, so they can charge whatever they want to. For example, my current gas bill is $350. I'd switch over to propane if I had the money to pay for the work to get the propane pipes and fixtures installed for propane. Well, yeah, I get that. Okay, so and that's another thing. It's kind of funny because if you talk about basically the economy being rigged, right? Like when you talk about the Chinese thing, well, the economy's rigged here too, right? The funny thing is, like, do you think you're like, if we were a truly capitalist country, you'd probably be paying a lot more for your electricity and your gas. Bugs Bunny versus Woody Woodpecker. Oh, Bugs Bunny easily. No particular reason other than Bugs Bunny has got an arsenal of weapons at his disposal, while Woodpecker has his beak. School buses, transfer trucks, and other such vehicles are governed through the salty target. Yeah, well, yeah. If you're talking about as far as speed limited, yes. In fact, almost all tractor trailers are, because most companies, like when you talk to truck drivers, most trucks are governed at either 65 or 70 miles per hour, even though they could theoretically go a lot faster. Tasmanian devil versus Elmer Fudd. Tasmanian devil would eat Elmer Fudd very quickly. Just drive 55 miles per hour in the left lane. Again, good luck getting people to do that. You act like, oh, well, if we just tell people that this lane is for 55 miles per hour, this lane is for 65 miles per hour, this lane is for 75 miles per hour, and this lane is sky's the limit, right? Which people have thought about that kind of thing, right? So if you and I'm sure if Indy Tiger's still here, he could probably talk in detail about how impractical that is. The problem isn't that that couldn't work. The problem is that people wouldn't follow it. You would have people that like because if the 55 mile, watch people on the freeway. The reason they switch lanes most of the time is because there's someone in front of them going slower. And so the person in the 55 mile per hour is fine there until they run into someone going too slow, and then they switch over to the 65 mile per hour lane. But now they're not going 65, so the guy coming up behind him at 65 switches over to the 75 lane, and to dodge him, the guy in the 75 mile per hour lane goes into the sky's the limit speed lane, and then the guy going 200 miles per hour plows into him, and there's a big nasty accident. Most accidents are caused because and people say, well, it's because people are driving too slow. Well, it's actually because people drive too aggressively, because they're trying to get around people that they perceive as driving too slow. If people drove the speed limit and only the speed limit, there would be far fewer accidents. Your speed limit tolerance reminds me of a joke about the guy who got caught doing a rolling stop. All right, I'm sure. Let's hold on, Robert. Driver said his stop was good enough, so the cop started hitting him and asked, "Would you like me to stop or almost stop?" Same thing. Oh, okay. I would say, like, being the nerd that I am, if a cop pulled me over and said you were, for a rolling stop, I would say, "No, officer, I stopped completely. The car had no forward momentum relative to my position." And that would be absolutely true. Although the stop sign was moving. The school systems are so concerned about child safety. As far as I know, no seat belts for school bus passengers. Well, that is a problem. I think that good luck getting a bunch of 10-year-olds to put on their seat belts. I understand what you're saying. You're 100% right. But yeah, it is what it is. But that's also part of the reason why you should never, ever tailgate or cut off or in any way, shape, or form drive near an active school bus. But people do it all the time because people are jerks. It's also probably lost a lot more in a hassle to bathe and keep clean back then. Have to take a trip down to the river instead of just hopping in the shower. That is true. You talking about like when we were talking about the old Hebrew laws. A New York City guy wants to put an extra tax on any businesses or billionaires leaving New York and take over their businesses. But good luck with that. I mean, that I don't think would pass muster. I figured you'd do something like that. Let's see, not sure what you're talking about. Capital gains, unrealized gains. I already answered that, really. But what happens if your assets go down? Do you get a tax refund every year depending on its value? No. I don't get a refund from the government because the value of my car is less than when I purchased it. I don't get a refund from the government if the value of my house goes down. I don't get a refund from the government because, and so, and by the way, people say, well, that's not the same thing. It absolutely is, because if you're investing in stocks, and those stocks go down in value, well, you didn't have to invest in stocks. The reason you invest in stocks is because you want to get rich, you want to make more money. And if you do, great. But if you don't, that's why you don't invest what you can't afford to lose. California already has had the nation's highest tax rates for several years now. That is true. Let's see. Yeah. Indy Tiger does have all the cereal money. But you know what? He's also known to be kind of aggressive, so he might be a serial killer. Let's see. Abe from Oddworld versus Professor X. Don't know Abe from Oddworld, so I couldn't say honestly. Maybe you should go back to school for economics degrees, solve the economy instead of unraveling the universe. Here's the thing. No, I'm not interested in economics. I have a passing interest in it just because I live in an economy. But the problem and this is a problem with a lot of educated people. A real problem with a lot of educated people is the arrogance of education. People believe that their system is true because they were taught that their system is true. It's the same problem I have with a lot of religious seminaries, right? If you go to an Assemblies of God seminary, they will teach you things that are anti-biblical. But people coming out of seminary believe them because they learned it in seminary. If you go to a Baptist seminary, you learn different doctrines, but they'll believe them. It's the same across the board, right? So people that have an education in something, depending on what the subject matter is, if it's not something like the actual science type thing, then they are generally taught this is correct, and if you disagree with that, you don't pass the class, and so everybody has to agree with it. And I will be right back. Don't worry, this will only take a second. All right. Okay, and I am just about back. Turn the camera back on. So the printer is now officially done. This print will need a little bit more cleaning up than the Daredevil one did. But this print came in 3 parts. So there's this part right here. This is technically a chin strap, so it'll go like right here, right? And then we have this piece here. This piece rests right here in the back of your head, right? And then we have the main piece right here. And keep in mind, this still has support material in it and everything, so let me clear off some of this so that it looks correct. Come on, don't want to break it. But sometimes cleaning the support material is a little bit of a pain. That piece is done. Come on, there we go. That piece is done. See, these are the little support pieces. It just helps in the printing process so that when it prints each individual part, it doesn't fall apart, doesn't collapse under its own weight. But you got to be careful when you're removing the support material because you can, and I have on several occasions, you can accidentally break your 3D print because you use a little too much force in removing the support material. Fortunately, if you have a decent printer, the support material is usually fairly easy to remove. And it's just a matter of squeezing it in the right places, which I'm almost done. So I do like this newer type of support design. So this is the main piece of support that was in the middle. So it prints this like tree-like structure. You see how it has a flat surface there, so that it has a platform on which to print part of the actual structure of what we will finally see here. And here we go. Ready? Hope you guys like this. The grand unveiling. So this is the cowl, if you will, from Batman, obviously, from the Batman specifically. So the Twilight Batman. I don't know if this will fit on my big old head. It might if I take my glasses off, but I'm not going to try that right now. But yeah, so this is actually came out pretty darn good. And so that big old chunk of support material that I showed you earlier, it prints inside of it so that the top of the helmet has a surface on which the printer to print. Otherwise, the whole thing would sag in on itself. So, hope you guys like that. When I have some time and then we see, so the part that goes in the back of your head, it fits right there in the print so that it covers the back of your head. Somehow I got muted. Sorry about that. Hopefully I wasn't muted for too long. I don't know how long. Let me see. Yeah. All right. So, but during the Pam Bondi hearing, I got censored by the government because I started talking about Pam Bondi. But during the Pam Bondi hearing, it's clear that that Republicans were asking questions that were pre-scripted, right? So they would say things like, "Oh, did I bump it with the man? It's been off all that time." And oh shoot, I am so sorry, guys. I'm an idiot. Well, I don't know where I was when I stopped the mask. What was the? Well, I apologize to anyone who I answered while the mask uh, was muted. Everything. Winnie the Pooh versus Tigger. Tigger wins that one. Tigger, please. Oh, and there was another super chat from Indy that I missed. I am so sorry, Indy, because I didn't have that screen up when I was doing the mask and stuff. It says, "Yep, I'm still here. Virginia left lane on the highway is passing only lane, and we're reminded of that all the time. People don't care." Yeah. In fact, usually the way most people don't even understand this, like typically a 4 lane freeway is typically divided into your entry and exit lane is the far right lane. So the only reason you should really be in the far right lane is when you're merging into traffic and when you're leaving the freeway. The next lane is like your cruising lane, right? So that's the lane you're driving the speed limit, cruising along your way. This is the lane where you take the bulk of your travel. The next lane over, sometimes called the fast lane or the left lane or whatever, is actually the proper name is the passing lane. The only time you should be in this lane is when you're going around the car in front of you. However, you should only be going around that car if they are driving below the speed limit. And then finally, depending on where you are, you might have an additional lane that is the HOV lane or high occupancy vehicle lane. In some areas, high occupancy vehicles can be 2 or 3 people in a car or more. And depending on the jurisdiction, may also include people who are driving electric vehicles or motorcycles. And also, depending on where you are, sometimes you simply pay to have access to that lane. So, if you want to have the special commuter lane that you pay extra for, there's that lane. But most people, they just say it's a free for all. And you're just zigging in and out of traffic as much as you can to try and, get where you're going. Didn't you play the Oddworld games? No, never played Oddworld. Tasmanian Devil versus Crash Bandicoot. Oh, Taz wins that one easy. Crash Bandicoot has a similar power set, but keep in mind, Crash Bandicoot's spinning is much more limited than Taz, and Crash Bandicoot is known for eating juicy pieces of fruit, where Tasmanian Devil is known for eating other creatures whole. Just like not long ago, Death Battle did a video, Ash Williams for Pokemon versus Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Won the Death Battle. Ash really didn't have powerful enough Pokemons to beat Yu-Gi-Oh!'s mantras. You know, I grew up before the Pokemon / Yu-Gi-Oh! Craze, so I know very little about them. I know that the Pokemon just say their name for whatever reason, and then you trap them in little balls and battle them against other Pokemon, but that's about all I know. Didn't have a black material. I have a small amount of black material, but I'm going to end up sanding it and painting it anyway. And so I didn't want to use my black material on it. Because the material is, I mean, it's not super expensive, but to print that is probably, in the black material, probably be about $15 worth of material, and I don't have a lot to spare, so I'm trying to hold off. But I have a significant amount of gray material. There's more material to support section than the actual mask. Yes, and that's why I actually, when I can, I want to get a. And actually, there isn't more of this material in the mask because you can't tell, these tree trunks are completely hollow and very thin. It's hard to show on camera, but you can see they are hollow. You can see the light through them because these are like, if I can. Well, no, I can't because I got this in the way, but they're easy to break. They're thin, and they are not built to be a solid, thing. Like you can squeeze them like that pretty easily. You can't do that with a proper 3D printed part. Like, this is much more solid. All right, and that's where the sound went out. So skipping the ones that just tell me that I'm muted. I am really sorry about that, guys. Robert Rose says, if I only knew what I know from Pawn Stars, what certain Pokemon cards boxes, the same thing with certain Yu-Gi-Oh cards and unopened boxes, I'd be pretty. Oh, if you only knew now what you knew from, or I assume you mean if you only knew then you would have, like, you'd be rich because of all the Pokemon cards and stuff. This is the most I've agreed with Salty say in a long time, says Creep. Well, I'm glad. Or unless you're just talking about because I was muted. Muted. Where's the sound? Is he singing right now? Yes, I was singing. And then now that's a point. You guys are being a jerk. 10 out of 10 for the stream. At first, when I first saw that comment, I thought you were being serious. I didn't realize everybody was saying, because I just brought up the other screen. And so I was thinking, oh, that's nice. Jerks. So I don't know audio since you showed the thing on the strap. Let's see. I texted him, but I've been having a problem. Thank you for that. But I've been having a problem with my phone. And I'm going to try to reset my phone. I keep meaning to do that. And see, because when people text me and even phone calls, I haven't heard a thing. All right, LOL. Watch later with closed captions on. Can you lip read? Ha, welcome back. Okay. Yeah, you bumped it with the mask. There we go. Okay, so I apologize, and now, fortunately, I'm almost caught up now, so I can wrap up the stream. Unless there's something pressing that you asked earlier that I answered when I was muted, in which case, ask it quickly. You were muted when you asked how long you would last as a monk. Yeah, so when I answered that one, I was saying that not long because I don't believe in their doctrine. Thank you for that, Josiah. So yeah, I would not last long because I disagree with their doctrine. I also, let me see. I don't know if I'm trying to go back, but trying to find everything is just going to be a pain. So I am truly sorry, guys. So not going comic book accurate. So not going comic book accurate. First interactions of the yellow Daredevil mask. Are you asking first impressions, or are you saying? Well, I mean, because if you're asking what I think of the yellow Daredevil mask, I mean, it was what Daredevil wore for the first few issues of the comic. However, do I prefer the yellow over the red? No. I think the red looks better. What did you say when you asked if I would get what I would do if I caught a leprechaun? I said I would be rich. Because, if you catch a leprechaun, you get their pot of gold. So, yeah, I would be rich. And then you're re-asking Bob the Builder versus Handy Manny. Bob the Builder, my answer was because can he fix it? Yes. Yes, he can. And then, now, it's not a stupid question. Keep in mind, I worked in telecommunications, so I do know that it's not a stupid question. Is your phone in Do Not Disturb mode? Funny you should ask. It actually is, but I have it set so that alerts from text messages and phone calls from contacts still come through. And I have it that way because I've been getting an absorbent amount of spam calls. Like if I turn Do Not Disturb off, my phone rings nonstop. So somebody got my number and put it on some calling list. So I get calls nonstop. Now I should just change my phone number and be done with it, but I haven't done that yet because I don't want to have to tell every single person that I have contact with, hey, here's my new phone number, but I'm going to have to do that sooner or later. But yeah. Oh, and Indy didn't hear what I said. So, okay, when you said you were quitting your job, I said a couple of things. Number one, I hope that you find a job. Very soon, and that it's something fulfilling for you and everything. But also, even more important, that because you quit your job, appreciate even more the fact that you were willing to super chat me because that's even more of a sacrifice. So thank you, my friend. But yeah, if you quit your job, and I know you, and I know you're not a dummy. So don't get me wrong. I'm just throwing this out there for the benefit of everybody. If you quit your job because you're in a position to where quitting your job is not going to break you, and you want to find something more fulfilling or whatever, I say absolutely do it, right? If you quit your job because you're frustrated with your boss, but quitting your job is going to put you in financial dire straits, you are an idiot, right? So, and I know that you're not an idiot. So basically, if you quit your job, you should be financially stable enough to where that's not going to, at least for some time, cause you any hardship. And knowing you, Indy, that's probably the case. And so, but I wish you luck. And let me see. Did I get your text? Yeah, you did. Let me see. I'm texting you back to make sure you get it, and then try texting me again. Let me see if my phone. Let me make sure everything is turned up. All right, so yeah, so text me when you get a chance there, Indy, and I want to see if it actually goes off this time because I just reset I did the basic reset of the phone. I'll reset the network connections and stuff if that doesn't work. What did you say when said that other forms of government are better than democracy? Oh, yeah, I actually went off about for a minute. So I think that's a patently ludicrous statement because democracy is not a form of government. Democracy is a system by which government officials are elected. So you need to be more specific. Are you saying there are better? You see, now, did you just text me? Okay, yeah, you did text. The only reason I know you texted me is because I looked at it, but I never heard it. So that is weird. I'm gonna have to look through the settings to try and figure this out. Because let me go to my do not disturb section. Where is it? Yeah, I'm gonna have to mess with this. Dang it! Oh, mad. All right, we'll mess with that later. But thank you, Indy. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not getting notifications still, so I got to figure that out. Because I might as well change my number if I can't get any notifications. What's even the point? Stupid, stupid phones. All right. So yeah, so as far as democracy is not a form of government. So if you're saying that, for example, capitalism is a form of government, socialism, communism, fascism, these are forms of government. Democracy is not a form of government. It is simply a system by which government officials are elected. Now, you can argue that there's such a thing as direct democracy, which is a form of government, but it's not a form of government that's been practiced in 1,000 years. So that I would dismiss because it's not a practical form of government for a society larger than 100 people. America is so far behind in robots and implementing them for public use. China has instituted robots for traffic control. Yeah, but I know that people like Elon Musk are all for robots to do everything. I am not. That's one of the things I really find disgusting about Elon Musk is he wants what little income I get from Uber, he wants to take it from me because he wants cyber cabs to basically go around with no driver collecting all that sweet, sweet Uber money. And by the way, Uber and Lyft are pumping tons of money into companies like Tesla and Waymo to try and advance this technology because Uber and Lyft are the first people to want to get rid of Uber and Lyft drivers because they want all the money instead of just 60 to 70%, which they're already taking. So screw those guys. I have no respect for that whatsoever. It's kind of like when you look at the ultimate computer. Computer technology and robots are great to a point. But when you start destroying human beings and human dignity for the sake of robotic advancement, that's a problem. That's a real problem. Has the proposed Tesla robots just pipe dream now? I don't know. The Tesla robots, I've yet to see them really do anything with it. I think Elon almost does the cardinal sin of business, and that is he constantly overpromises and underdelivers. The Cybertruck is a splendid example of that. The so-called $30,000 Tesla, which still has not, or not 30, but $20,000 Tesla, still never materialized, and it never will until he has real competition, because competition is what drives prices. Stan says, "Don't worry, Elon will just give you universal high income. Guess he'll redistribute his robo-taxi profits." Yeah, that's never going to happen. Just like everybody got their Doge checks, right? Oh yeah, no. I'm sorry, but Elon Musk can eat my shorts. I do not think for 1 minute. I don't trust him, not because, oh, he's a weird foreigner. He is a weird foreigner, but that has nothing to do with it. I don't trust a person who has no concern for human dignity. None. And he won't even listen to facts. Like when he sits there and he says that I remember I did this whole thing about, he did an interview where he was talking about how horrible it is that during COVID so many companies let their workforce work from home, and how that just makes it so that everybody is lazy and doesn't do anything. And it's like, but in actuality, productivity goes up when people work from home because they're in a more comfortable environment. For one thing, when it's snack time, they can go to their own kitchen and make their own snack of whatever they want. When they need to go to the bathroom, they go to their own bathroom without worrying about sitting on the same toilet that gross person that sits 2 seats down from you sat in, right? So people are generally much happier and more content when working from home. Now, that being said, obviously there are some jobs that can't telecommute. Like if you're an auto manufacturer, you need people to work the assembly line. But, and if it was up to Elon, though, that would be all done with robotics. And if the entire production facility is run by robots, then the only thing you need people for are to run the robots, and they can do that remotely. Even if a robot breaks, you can have repair bots that are run remotely. Are you ready for Easter? Ready? How? I mean, we don't hide eggs or anything, so sure. China has so many infrastructure problems: collapsed buildings, roads falling apart, bridges falling down. They have a name for it: tofu dregs. Corrupt contractors for the last 20 years. I don't know that much about the larger scale Chinese infrastructure. You would probably be much more of an expert on that. And if that is a problem, then the funny thing is China tends to, when if it's not important, they just kind of ignore it, and I think that's where we have the rotting infrastructure problem. But could they fix it? Is the question. I think they could if they wanted to, but do they even want to? That's a whole other question. All right. So it looks like we are all caught up. So, and and Robert with a wonderful question. Just like bidets have been proven to be better at cleaning you afterwards, yet seems like pretty difficult to find them here in America. My local Lowe's doesn't even have any, but you can buy them online. I've seen that, and they're becoming more popular in America. However, yeah, you're in some countries they're just like automatically built into the toilets everywhere you look. And I would say this is that I'm all for them, but it needs to be a good one. I don't want some cold water being splashed on me or something. So not the way they do it. However, I agree. They are technically better than than anything. Except what's better than bidets is the three seashells. But we don't have those anywhere. What if Michael was a belle? Then I'd probably make a run for the border.